I woke up in a cheap motel to hear my homeless husband on the phone ordering a hostile takeover of my father's company, realizing I hadn't married a beggar. I had married a shark. My family disowned me on a rainy Tuesday because I chose to marry a man they called a filthy beggar, found shivering on a park bench. My father laughed as he cut me out of his billion-dollar will, claiming I would be crawling back within a week when the hunger set in. They didn't know that the homeless man holding my hand, wearing a coat held together by duct tape, was actually an undercover billionaire conducting the ultimate test of loyalty, and he was hiding a black card that could buy their entire estate 3 times over. The heavy iron gates of the Sterling estate slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. I stood on the wet pavement, clutching a single suitcase that contained my entire life. The rain plastered my hair to my face, mixing with the tears I refused to let my father see. Standing under the flickering streetlight was Gabriel. He looked exactly as my father described him, wretched. His boots were worn through at the toes, his beard was unkempt, and his oversized army jacket smelled of wood smoke and old rain. To the world, he was a nobody. To me, he was the only person who had ever looked at me and seen Sophia, not the Sterling heiress. "You didn't have to do this," Gabriel said, his voice raspy. He stepped forward, shielding me with his body from the wind. "You're giving up a kingdom for a pauper, Sophia? You'll regret it. I'd rather live in a cardboard box with you than in a golden cage with them," I said, taking his rough, calloused hand. "Let's go." It had started 3 months ago. I was walking through Central Park, escaping another suffocating gala, when a mugger cornered me. Passers-by in expensive suits ignored my screams. But Gabriel, who was sitting on a bench feeding pigeons, didn't. He charged the attacker with a ferocity that terrified me, taking a knife slash to his arm to protect a stranger. When I tried to pay him, he refused. "Keep your money," he had said. "Just buy me a coffee and talk to me." So I did. We talked for hours. I found a soul that was deep, intelligent, and kind. Everything my family wasn't. Tonight was supposed to be the introduction. I flashed back to the dinner scene an hour ago. The dining room was illuminated by crystal chandeliers. My father sat at the head of the table, cutting his steak with surgical precision. My stepsister, Chloe, was scrolling on her phone, looking bored. When I walked in with Gabriel, the silence was deafening. I'd bought him a clean suit from a thrift store, but it didn't fit right. He looked uncomfortable, out of place among the porcelain and silver. "Is this a joke?" my father asked, not even standing up. "Sophia, why is the gardener eating at my table?" "This is Gabriel," I said, my voice steady. "The man I told you about. The man who saved my life." "He smells like wet dog." Chloe wrinkled her nose, laughing. "Did you pick him up from the shelter?" "Daddy, lock the silverware." Gabriel stood there, head bowed, taking the abuse silently. His eyes were focused on the floor, his hands clasped behind his back. "He is my fiancé," I announced. My father dropped his knife. It clattered against the china plate. "Fiancé?" he whispered. He stood up, his face turning a violent shade of red. "You want to marry a vagrant? A leech? Someone who probably wants to murder you for your jewelry?" "He doesn't care about money," I shouted. "Unlike you, he cares about me." "Love doesn't pay the bills, Sophia," my father roared. "Look at him, he's a failure, a parasite. If you marry this trash, you are out. No trust fund, no inheritance, no access to the Hamptons house. You leave with nothing but the clothes on your back." He looked at Gabriel with pure disgust. "And you? How much do you want? 10,000? 20? Take it and leave my daughter alone." My father pulled out his checkbook. Gabriel looked up then. For a split second, I saw something in his eyes that didn't match his appearance. It wasn't fear. It wasn't greed. It was amusement. A cold, hard glint of steel. "I don't want your money, Mr. Sterling," Gabriel said softly. "Get out." My father pointed to the door. "Both of you, and don't come back until you've come to your senses." Back in the rain, Gabriel squeezed my hand. "Where will we go?" he asked. "I sleep in a shelter, Sophia. It's dangerous." "I have a little cash saved in my purse," I said. "We'll find a motel, and tomorrow we'll figure it out. I have a degree. I can work." We walked 10 blocks to the Starlight Motel. The neon sign was buzzing and missing the letter L. The room cost $50 a night. It smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach. The carpet was sticky. To me, it was freedom. We sat on the sagging bed. Gabriel looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This is your last chance to go back. Once we marry, there is no going back to your old life." "I don't want my old life," I said. "I want you." We didn't wait. The next morning, we went to the city clerk's office. I wore a white sundress I had packed. Gabriel wore his thrift store suit. There were no guests, no flowers, no photographer, just us. "I, Sophia, take you, Gabriel, to be my lawfully wedded husband, for richer or for poorer." "For poorer," Gabriel repeated, a strange smile playing on his lips. "Definitely for poorer." That night, back in the motel room, we celebrated with a pizza and a bottle of cheap wine. It was the happiest dinner of my life. I fell asleep in his arms, exhausted but at peace. At 3:00 a.m., I woke up. The bed beside me was empty. I heard a low voice coming from the bathroom. The door was cracked open slightly. I rubbed my eyes thinking Gabriel was sick. I started to get up to check on him. But then I heard his tone. It wasn't the raspy, hesitant voice of the homeless man I knew. It was crisp, authoritative, and commanded attention. "Phase 1 is complete," Gabriel was saying. "She signed the marriage license. No prenup requested. She gave up the sterling fortune." Pause. "No, Alfred, don't release the funds yet. Let them think we're starving. I want to see how far her father will go to break her. Buy the building she applies to work at. Ensure she can't get a job in her field. I want to see if her loyalty holds when the hunger starts." My heart stopped. Release the funds? Alfred? And Alfred? Gabriel continued, his voice dropping to a colder register. "Start acquiring shares of Sterling Industries, quietly. I want a controlling interest by the end of the month. My father-in-law called me trash. I think it's time I bought the dumpster he lives in." I froze in the dark, watching the sliver of light from the bathroom door. Who was I married to? Gabriel stepped out of the bathroom. He had shaved his beard. He stood taller. The slump in his shoulders was gone. He saw me watching him. He didn't look panicked. He walked over to the bed and sat down. "Go back to sleep, Sophia," he whispered, stroking my hair. "The hard part is just beginning. But trust me, you bet on the right horse." I closed my eyes, feigning sleep, my mind racing. My husband wasn't a beggar. He was a shark. And he was about to eat my family alive. My father bought the motel just to kick us into the mud, but he watched in horror as a black armored SUV picked us up, revealing that his homeless son-in-law was actually Mr. Blackwood, the billionaire king in disguise. My father made sure I couldn't get a job anywhere in the city, using his influence to blacklist me from every corporate office and gallery. I went from managing art auctions to scrubbing grease off plates at a roadside diner just to buy bread. My sister showed up to tip me a single penny and mock my homeless husband, not realizing that while she was laughing, he was silently authorizing the purchase of the very ground she stood on. For 2 weeks, reality hit me like a sledgehammer. The romantic haze of running away wore off, replaced by the gnawing ache of hunger and the sting of rejection. I applied to 40 jobs, galleries, museums, even receptionist roles at firms I used to consult for. The answer was always the same: a polite decline, followed by a nervous glance at a memo on their desk. The name Sterling had become toxic. My father was systematically starving us out. I ended up at Sal's Diner, a greasy spoon on the edge of the industrial district. The uniform was yellow polyester, stained with ketchup from the previous waitress. The air smelled of burnt bacon and despair. "Table 4 needs a refill," Sal, the owner, barked from the kitchen. "Move it, princess." I grabbed the coffee pot. My hands, once manicured, were red and chapped from the harsh dish soap. I walked to table 4 and froze. Sitting there, looking like a vision of pastel perfection, was Chloe. She was surrounded by 3 of her socialite friends, girls I used to go to brunch with. Chloe looked up, feigning shock. "Oh my God, Sophia, is that you?" The table erupted in giggles. "Hi, Chloe," I said, gripping the coffee pot. "Can I get you anything?" "I'll have a water," Chloe smirked. "Tap water, since that's probably all you can afford to serve." She pulled out her phone and started live streaming. "Guys, you won't believe this. My sister, the heiress, is serving burgers. This is what happens when you marry trash." I poured the water. My hand shook. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "Will that be all?" I asked. "Actually, Chloe said, picking up her glass. This glass is dirty. She deliberately tilted her hand. The ice-cold water splashed all over my apron and shoes. Oops, she laughed. Clumsy me. I stood there, dripping wet, humiliation burning my cheeks. Hey! A voice boomed from the counter. Gabriel was sitting there. He usually came in during my break to share a sandwich with me. He was wearing his worn-out flannel shirt and work boots. He looked rough, but his eyes were blazing. He walked over to the table. He didn't yell. He didn't cause a scene. He stood tall, projecting an aura of authority that silenced the table instantly. You dropped something, Gabriel said calmly. He pointed to the floor. Chloe rolled her eyes. Go away, hobo. I don't have any change. I wasn't asking for money, Gabriel said, his voice smooth, articulate, and completely devoid of the street slang he usually adopted. I was pointing out your dignity. You seem to have dropped it along with your manners. It's fascinating, Chloe. You wear Chanel, but you behave like cheap knockoff polyester. Chloe's mouth fell open. Her friends stopped laughing. A homeless man wasn't supposed to speak like an Oxford professor. Who do you think you are? Chloe sputtered. Someone who knows the difference between value and price, Gabriel said. He took a napkin and gently dabbed the water off my apron. He looked at me with infinite tenderness. Go take your break, Sophia. I'll handle the spill. He turned back to Chloe. Leave. Now. Before I have you removed for harassment. You can't kick me out, Chloe shrieked. My father owns half this city. But he doesn't own this diner, Gabriel said. He looked at Sal, the owner, who was watching from the kitchen. Gabriel gave Sal a subtle nod, a nod that said, I'll cover it. Get out, Sal yelled, waving his spatula. No bullying my staff. Chloe huffed, grabbed her bag, and threw a coin on the table. It spun and settled. A penny. Keep the change, she hissed, storming out with her entourage. I looked at Gabriel, the way he had commanded the room, the way Sal had listened to him. It was strange. How did you do that? I whispered. Confidence is the only currency the rich respect, Gabriel said, winking. But behind the wink, I saw the shark again. That night, we walked back to the Starlight Motel in the rain. My feet ached. I was exhausted. But when we got to room 104, the key card didn't work. The little light flashed red. Hey! I banged on the door. The manager, a greasy man named Rick, stepped out of the office. He looked apologetic, but mostly he looked paid off. Sorry, folks, Rick said, not meeting our eyes. You gotta go. We paid for the week, I argued. New ownership, Rick shrugged. Just sold the place an hour ago. The new owner wants the building cleared immediately for renovations. It's effective now. My father, I whispered. It had to be. He was buying the motel just to kick us onto the street. He was tightening the noose. Our stuff? Gabriel asked. In the dumpster out back, Rick said, slamming the office door. We ran to the back. Our suitcase was sitting in a puddle of mud. My clothes were soaked. I broke. I sat down on the wet suitcase and sobbed. The rain mixed with my tears. I was cold, hungry, and homeless. He won, I cried. Gabriel, he won. We have nowhere to go. We have to go back. I can't live on the street. Gabriel knelt in the mud in front of me. He took my face in his hands. Look at me, Sophia, he said. Do you trust me? I don't know anymore, I wept. Love isn't enough, Gabriel. We need a roof. You're right, he said. He stood up. He pulled out a phone. Not the cheap burner phone he usually carried, a sleek black satellite phone. He didn't try to hide it this time. Alfred, he spoke into the phone. His voice was cold, commanding. Protocol shelter. Pick us up. Location, the Starlight Motel. And Alfred, execute the purchase of Sterling Media Group, hostile takeover. Don't wait for the market to open. I stared at him. The rain seemed to stop existing. Gabriel, I whispered, what are you doing? Ending the test, he said. He looked at me, and the homeless man dissolved completely. In his place stood a Titan. Headlights swept across the alley. A massive black-armored SUV pulled up. It wasn't a taxi. It looked like a government vehicle. A driver in a pristine black suit jumped out. He held a large umbrella. He walked over to us, ignoring the mud, ignoring the dumpster. He opened the back door and bowed to Gabriel. Good evening, Mr. Blackwood, the driver said. The jet is fueled. Mr. Blackwood, Gabriel extended his hand to me. Get in, Sophia, he said. Your father thinks he put us on the street. I think it's time I showed you where I really live." I looked at the car. I looked at the man I thought I knew. I took his hand. As I slid into the leather interior, I realized one thing. I hadn't married a pauper. I had married a king in disguise. And my father, he had just declared war on the wrong man. He showed me the red line of my father's crashing stock and handed me a designer gown, telling me that tomorrow morning, the new majority shareholder needed to make an entrance. The silence inside the armored SUV was absolute, a stark contrast to the chaos of the rainstorm outside. I sat on the hand-stitched leather seat, my muddy clothes staining the pristine interior, staring at the man sitting across from me. He had wiped the dirt from his face with a hot towel offered by the chauffeur, revealing skin that glowed with health and grooming. The beggar I had married was sipping sparkling water from a crystal glass, and on his wrist, where a piece of twine used to be, now sat a Patek Philippe watch worth more than my father's entire house. "Who are you?" I whispered. My voice felt small in the luxury of the car. "Gabriel, tell me the truth." "I am Gabriel," he said, setting the glass down. "But my last name isn't Doe. It's Blackwood." I stopped breathing. Blackwood. Gabriel Blackwood. The CEO of Blackwood Venture Capital. The man who owned half the tech startups in Silicon Valley. The man whose net worth was rumored to be in the 12 figures. He wasn't just rich, he was buy a country rich. My father, with his real estate empire, was a minnow compared to this shark. "You're him?" I stammered. "But why? Why the park bench? Why the ragged coat? Why let my father humiliate you?" "Because I needed to know," Gabriel said, leaning forward. His eyes were intense, stripping away my defenses. "In my world, Sophia, nobody loves you. They love your portfolio. They love your connections. My last fiancé left me the day my stock dipped 5% because she was afraid of instability. I swore I wouldn't marry again until I found someone who would stand by me in the mud, someone who would choose me over a trust fund." He reached out and took my hand. His grip was warm, firm. "You gave up everything for a homeless man," he said softly. "You defended me when I had nothing to offer you but a sandwich. You passed the test, Sophia. And now you get the reward." "I don't want a reward," I said, pulling my hand back, feeling a flash of anger. "I want honesty. You watched me scrub dishes. You watched me cry over a penny tip. You could have stopped it." "I had to see how far they would go." Gabriel's voice hardened. "I had to see if your father had any redeeming qualities, any mercy. Tonight, when he bought the motel just to throw us into the rain, he signed his own death warrant." The car slowed to a halt. "Where are we?" I looked out the tinted window. We weren't at a hotel. We were at the private airfield. A sleek Gulfstream jet was waiting on the tarmac, its engines humming. "We're going home," Gabriel said. "To the penthouse in Manhattan. I think you've spent enough time in motels." An hour later, I was standing in a living room that was larger than the entire diner I used to work in. The penthouse walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. The rain lashed against the glass, impotent against the fortress Gabriel had built. I had showered in a bathroom made of marble and gold. I was wearing a silk robe that Alfred, the assistant, had produced from somewhere. Gabriel was standing by the window looking out at the city lights. He held a tablet in his hand. I walked over to him. The anger was fading, replaced by a surreal sense of awe. "This is really yours?" I asked. "Ours," he corrected. "Everything I have is yours, Sophia. No prenup. Remember?" He turned the tablet toward me. It showed a live feed of the Asian stock markets, which were currently open. It showed a company ticker. STR Group, Sterling Real Estate Group. The line on the graph was red. It was plummeting. "What is this?" I asked. "Your father's company," Gabriel said calmly. "While we were flying, Alfred executed phase 2. We dumped a massive amount of short positions on the market. Rumors are circulating that Sterling Group is insolvent. The stock is crashing." "You're destroying him?" I asked. "No." Gabriel swiped the screen. "I'm buying him." He showed me another screen. A purchase order. Blackwood VC acquires 51% controlling stake in Sterling debt obligations. Your father operates on debt, Sophia. He leverages his buildings to buy more buildings. Tonight, I bought his debt from the banks. As of tomorrow morning, I am his primary creditor. I own his loans. I own his mortgage. I own him. I stared at the screen. My father, the man who had sneered at Gabriel, the man who had called him a parasite. He was now unknowingly in debt to the very man he had kicked out. "He doesn't know?" I asked. "Not yet," Gabriel smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just locked the cage. "He thinks he won. He's probably celebrating right now with Chloe." "He is," I said, remembering Chloe's laugh at the diner. "He loves to celebrate his victories." "Well," Gabriel put the tablet down and walked over to a wardrobe. He pulled out a stunning emerald green evening gown. It still had the tags on it. "Alfred estimated your size," Gabriel said. "Put this on." "Why?" I asked. "It's 2 a.m. Because tomorrow morning there is an emergency board meeting at Sterling Group to discuss the stock crash," Gabriel said. "Your father will be there. Chloe will be there. The entire board will be there." He walked over to me and kissed my forehead. "And the new majority shareholder needs to make an entrance." I looked at the dress. I looked at the city below. I remembered the penny Chloe threw at me. I remembered my father's cruel laughter. I took the dress. "Do I get to fire them?" I asked. Gabriel grinned. "My love," he said, "you get to do whatever you want." My father screamed for security to remove the beggar from his chair, only to freeze when Gabriel revealed his true identity and handed me the CEO position, telling my father that room 104 at the motel was available. The boardroom of Sterling Enterprises was usually a place of hushed whispers and polite nods, but this morning it smelled of panic sweat and stale coffee. The stock ticker on the giant wall monitor was flashing red, showing a free fall that had wiped out 30% of the company's value in 4 hours. My father was pacing at the head of the table, his tie loosened, screaming at a terrified junior analyst. "Find out who is dumping the shares," my father roared, slamming his fist on the mahogany table. "Is it the Japanese? Is it a hedge fund? Who is attacking us?" We don't know, sir," the analyst stammered. "The buyer is hiding behind shell companies. But they aren't just selling, sir. They're buying the debt. Whoever this is, they want control." Chloe was sitting in the corner, filing her nails, looking bored. "Daddy, relax. It's just a glitch. Can I go now? I have a spa appointment." "Shut up, Chloe," he snapped. "We are losing everything." At that exact moment, the double oak doors of the boardroom swung open with a heavy, cinematic thud. Every head turned. I walked in first. I wasn't wearing my waitress uniform. I wasn't wearing the muddy clothes from the motel. I was wearing the emerald green silk gown Gabriel had given me. It flowed around me like liquid money. My hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and diamonds, real heavy diamonds, glittered at my throat. Behind me walked Gabriel. He was unrecognizable from the man they had met at dinner. The beard was trimmed to designer perfection. The thrift store suit was gone, replaced by a bespoke Italian three-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He didn't walk like a beggar. He walked like a king entering his throne room. My father froze mid-shout. Chloe dropped her nail file. "Sophia," my father whispered, blinking. Then his shock turned to rage. "What are you doing here? And why are you dressed like that? Did you steal that dress?" "Security!" Chloe shrieked, jumping up. "Get them out! They're trespassing! Daddy, the hobo is back!" 2 security guards stepped forward from the hallway. Gabriel didn't even look at them. He just raised one hand, a single finger pointing up. "Stay," he commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The guards stopped. They looked at Gabriel. They looked at his suit. They looked at the Patek Philippe on his wrist. They instinctively recognized that this man outranked everyone in the room. They stepped back. "What is the meaning of this?" my father spluttered, marching toward us. "You think because you put on a costume you can crash my board meeting? You are disowned. You are nothing." Gabriel walked past my father as if he were a piece of furniture. He walked straight to the head of the table, my father's chair. He pulled it out. He sat down. He placed a single folder on the table. The board members gasped. Nobody sat in Mr. Sterling's chair. "Get up!" my father screamed, his face turning purple. "That is my seat, you filthy panhandler! I will have you arrested!" "Actually, Richard," Gabriel said, using my father's first name with chilling casualness, "it's my chair, and it's my table. And, technically," he looked around the room, "it's my building." "You're insane," Chloe laughed nervously. "He's on drugs, Daddy." "My name," Gabriel said, locking eyes with my father, "is Gabriel Blackwood." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. A board member at the end of the table dropped his pen. Clatter. Blackwood? The CFO whispered, turning pale. As in, Blackwood Venture Capital? The same, Gabriel said. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, Blackwood VC owns 51% of the debt obligations of Sterling Enterprises, which means, Richard, that I am your new boss. My father staggered back. He grabbed the back of a chair for support. He looked at the beggar he had mocked. He looked at the billionaire who had just bought his life. No, my father wheezed. That's impossible. You were in the park. You smelled like... Camouflage. Gabriel smiled coldly. I wanted to see who in this family had a soul. I found only one. He gestured to me. I stepped forward. I walked to the side of the table where my father was standing, trembling. You told me I would come crawling back, I said, my voice steady and strong. You told me I would be begging for scraps within a week. I looked at Chloe. She looked terrified. She was realizing that the penny she tipped me was going to cost her everything. I didn't crawl back, Father, I said. I bought my way back. Sophia! My father's voice cracked. He tried to summon a smile, a pathetic attempt at manipulation. Honey, this is wonderful. A test. You married Gabriel Blackwood. We're rich. We're saved. I knew you were smart. I knew you would pick a winner. The speed at which he flipped was nauseating. We? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, the family. He reached out to hug me. We can merge the companies. Chloe, come say hello to your new brother-in-law. I stepped back, letting his arms grasp at empty air. There is no we, I said. Gabriel bought the company, but he isn't running it. I looked at Gabriel. He nodded. I'm appointing a new CEO, Gabriel announced to the board. Effective immediately. Someone who knows the value of hard work. Someone who knows what it's like to serve. He pointed at me. Sophia Sterling is the new CEO of Sterling Enterprises. What? My father choked. She's a girl. She knows nothing about business. She was washing dishes yesterday. And today she owns you, Gabriel said. I walked over to the intercom system on the table. I pressed the button for security. This is Sophia Sterling, I said into the mic. Please escort the former CEO, Richard Sterling, and his daughter Chloe out of the building. You can't do this, Chloe screamed, stomping her foot. I live in the penthouse. My clothes are there. The company owns the penthouse, I said coldly. And since you are no longer an employee or a dependent of the company, you are trespassing. I looked at my father. He was broken. The realization that his greed had blinded him to the biggest opportunity of his life was eating him alive. Sophia, he begged, tears real this time. Please, where will I go? I remembered the rain. I remembered the motel manager throwing our suitcase in the dumpster. I hear the Starlight Motel has vacancies, I said. Room 104 is available. It smells a bit like mold, but it's affordable. The security guards, the same ones my father had hired, walked in. They looked at me. I nodded. They grabbed my father by the arms. Don't touch me, he yelled as they dragged him toward the door. I built this company. I am Sterling. Not anymore, I whispered. As the doors closed behind them, the boardroom was silent. 12 middle-aged men in expensive suits were staring at me, terrified. They were waiting to see if they were next. I looked at Gabriel. He winked at me from the head of the table. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my emerald dress. Gentlemen, I said to the board, shall we begin? I left a single penny on the table for my sister, the new waitress, and walked out to sit on a park bench that bore a brass plaque reading, Where a King Found His Queen. The sound of the gavel hitting the woodblock was the sweetest melody I had ever heard. Richard Sterling, the judge announced, his voice echoing in the packed courtroom. For the crimes of embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny involving the Margaret Sterling Cancer Foundation, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. My father collapsed into his chair. He looked old. The dye in his hair had faded, revealing gray roots. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by the terrified whimper of a man who realized his money could no longer buy him an exit. As the bailiffs dragged him away, he looked back at the gallery. He looked for Chloe. She wasn't there. He looked for his friends. They were gone. Then he looked at me. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just watched him disappear through the side door, finally closing the book on the man who had tried to break me. 6 months later, the snow was falling softly on the city streets. I adjusted my cashmere coat and pushed open the door to Sal's Diner. The bell chimed. The smell of burnt bacon and stale coffee hit me, triggering a wave of memories. But this time, I wasn't wearing a polyester uniform. I was wearing boots that cost more than the building. I walked to booth 4, the same booth where Chloe had spilled water on me. Gabriel sat opposite me, smiling. "Are you sure she's here?" I asked. "Sal told me he hired a new girl last month," Gabriel said. "Said she was desperate, no references, no skills, but she needed the money." A waitress walked out of the kitchen, carrying a heavy tray of dirty dishes. Her blonde hair was tied back in a messy bun. Her apron was stained with ketchup. She looked exhausted. It was Chloe. She placed the tray on the counter and wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. Then, she turned to take our order. She froze. Her eyes went wide. She looked at me, then at Gabriel. She looked at our clothes, our peace, our happiness. Then she looked down at her own grease-stained hands. "Hi, Chloe," I said softly. "Sophia," she whispered. Her voice was cracked. The haughty socialite was dead. What do you want?" "Just water," I said. "Tap water." Chloe swallowed hard. Her hands were shaking. She went to the counter, filled 2 glasses with tap water, and brought them back. She set them down carefully, terrified of spilling a drop. "Is there anything else?" she asked, her voice trembling. I can get you the specials." "No," I said. "That's all." She stood there for a moment, shifting awkwardly. She looked like she wanted to ask for help. She wanted to ask for money. She wanted to beg. But she looked at Gabriel, the man she had called a hobo, and the words died in her throat. "I have to get back to work," she mumbled. "Wait," I said. I reached into my purse. "For your service." I placed a single coin on the table, a penny. Chloe stared at the copper coin. Her face turned red, then pale. Tears welled up in her eyes. It was the exact tip she had thrown at me when I was starving. "Keep the change," I whispered. Chloe didn't say a word. She couldn't. She just nodded, grabbed the penny, and hurried back to the kitchen to scrub the grill. I took a sip of the water. It tasted like victory. We left the diner and walked to Central Park. The snow was covering the ground in a pristine white blanket. We walked to our bench. The one where Gabriel used to sleep. The one where he saved me from the mugger. But there was something different about it today. There was a small brass plaque screwed into the wood. I brushed the snow off the plaque to read it. "The Sterling Blackwood Bench, property of Sophia and Gabriel, where a king found his queen." I looked at Gabriel. "You bought the bench?" I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. "I bought the whole Park Conservancy, actually," he shrugged, wrapping his arm around me. "But the bench is the important part." We sat down. The cold wood felt familiar. "You know," Gabriel said, looking at the skyline, a skyline we now dominated. "Your father said you would lose everything if you married me." "He was wrong," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. "I lost the things that didn't matter. The fake friends, the toxic family, the golden cage." I looked at the ring on my finger. Simple. Elegant. "I married a homeless man," I whispered, "and I ended up the richest woman in the world." "Not because of the money," Gabriel kissed the top of my head. "No," I agreed, "because I found the one thing money can't buy." "Loyalty?" he asked. "Love," I said. We sat there in the snow, watching the world go by. 2 people who had started with nothing but a lie and ended up with the only truth that mattered. My father was in a cage, my sister was serving tables, and I was finally home. If you enjoyed this story of true love and karma, hit that like button and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what is the most valuable thing you own that money didn't buy? Thanks for watching.